This is APH's Access Academy, and today we are ready to step into our last webinar in a series of 4, all focused on tactile graphics literacy for students with visual impairments. This is what we have been building up to, the Monarch, Tactile Access to Digital Literacy. If this is the first time you've heard of the Monarch, you are in for a real treat. It's a unique digital device that is multi-line, graphics capable with refreshable braille display. I know that our presenters are eager to begin, so I'm super happy to pass things over to them now.
Hello, I am Stephanie Walker, and I am the outreach specialist for the Southcentral region. The Southcentral region includes Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas. I am a TVI and a comms and a self-proclaimed geek and really love all things technology. Leslie?
I'm Leslie Weilbacher. I am the outreach specialist for the Northwest region. So this is Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Alaska, Hawaii, the Northern Marianas Islands, Guam, and American Samoa. I
Wow.
am, yeah, I am also a TVI O&M, and I will say a very much self-proclaimed nerd. And I love assistive technology. I use assistive technology, and I am very excited to be here to discuss this innovative product.
Right, and we just want to remind you about the other webinars in the Tactile Graphics Literacy for Students with Visual Impairments 4-part webinar series. Webinars 1 through 3, which begin with the very early stages of Tactile Foundation for Graphics Understanding and move you all the way through strategies and resources for the instruction and evaluation of tactile graphicacy skills, can be found on the Access Academy website. They have all been recorded for your viewing pleasure. So today, at the end of the webinar, we hope that you should be able to identify the different types and features of refreshable braille displays, describe the importance of digital literacy and refreshable braille in providing access to tactile information and graphic literacy skill development. Finally, we want to make sure that you can list the skills and background knowledge necessary for a student to benefit from the use of a multi-line, graphics-capable braille display like the Monarch. So we're going to start off today with a little bit of review from webinar 3. I am not going to do Jenny Wheeler any justice in going through this information again with you. So I highly encourage you to go back and watch webinar 3 because it was full of wonderful information about the importance of tactile graphics literacy. So a visual impairment affects the entire process of information gathering. And in our world, we have an increasing amount of information that is used in the workplace, school, and everyday living that is presented in a graphical form. So our role as teachers of students with visual impairments is to provide tactile, graphic-rich environments for all learners, as well as teach them systematically how to use tactile graphic skills in reading and gaining information from those. There are 2 wonderful quotes that we have to share with you today. The first comes from Dr. Rosenblum: "Knowing how to gather from information from graphics and use it is an important skill." And the other quote comes from Dr. Kent Cullers from Touch the Universe. He is the world's first blind astronomer. "It has often been said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, for the first time in my career, I get to touch the picture." So of course, we come across everyday challenges when we are trying to access graphics in education. Ann Atkins stated it very well. Historically, by the time students with visual impairments enter school, they have not received enough instruction in the development and the use of their tactile skills or had enough opportunities to touch and explore the world. It is so important that we begin to teach these tactile graphic skills from a very early age, and really hone in those skills and those developments for our students as they move through in education. So just to review, what is tactile graphicacy? It is the ability to access, comprehend, and produce tactile graphics or raised line drawings. This skill requires fine motor sensitivity and dexterity. You also need cognitive concepts such as part to whole, symbolic representation, and understanding, as well as the recognition of braille symbols, graphic scanning, and creating graphics. So you're going to use a variety of strategies, and this knowledge has to be carefully constructed through systematic and explicit instruction. So some of the characteristics of tactile graphics literacy: perception. So the perception is that there are different kinds of symbolic information on a page with different types of meaning. And one of the examples that we have to go through perception actually goes along with the picture on the screen of mitosis. And this picture brings back some wonderful memories for me teaching junior high 7th grade science. So we're going to put those skills at work as I try to explain to you how this might turn into a graphic representation. So if we were to do a graphic representation of mitosis, which is shown on the screen, circles may be used to represent the cells in different phases. Whole or partial curves, either solid or dotted, may be used to define the nucleus of the cell and to designate the chromosomes and the movement of the chromosomes within the cell, which is a very important part of mitosis or cell division, is to know where those chromosomes are within each one of those cells as you begin to pull apart and one cell becomes two. Another characteristic of tactile graphics literacy is being able to discriminate between two different tactile surfaces and to draw meaning from them. So an example of that would be a map using different textures to represent the mountains, the rivers, the journeys, the boundaries, cities, populations, or other natural resources. A tactual reader has to be able to discriminate between these features and learn to understand what they mean. Some additional characteristics of tactile graphics literacy include that it is not inherent for Braille readers. It is an advanced form of tactile literacy, and it requires explicit and systematic instruction in order to build those skills. It also provides a focus for attention and perception. It builds pathways to retain and memorize information. There is a natural destination with tactile graphics for conversation as well as social interaction. How many emojis do we use now to communicate, right? Pictures invite and motivate a learner's curiosity and their active engagement. So when we're doing graphic literacy instruction, we need to make sure that learners derive meaning from interaction with tactile graphics. They need equivalent tactile materials so that they can receive their information at the same time as their sighted peers and be able to go through the same opportunities to learn about that information and how to gather and hone their ability to take that information and answer questions or be able to discern some data from that information. All learners need access to tactile experiences at all developmental levels. Tactile literacy instruction is not just circles, squares, and textures at a preschool elementary age. It goes all the way up through your higher level math and science classes where we have to take graphs and maps and charts and be able to discern and pull information from them. Now I'm going to pass it to Leslie, and she's going to talk about the role of digital literacy tools.
Great, thanks. And that maps and math, graphs and charts, that we will delve into that more deeply in a moment. The role of digital literacy tools. So what is digital literacy? It's the ability to use a variety of technologies, platforms, environments, and individual collaborative strategies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information. That is from the American Library Association. This requires cognitive, technical, and problem-solving skills. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like a STEM curriculum to me.
Sure does, Leslie.
So, so why do students need digital literacy skills? Everyday tasks require digital literacy. What are we doing right now? We are communicating over a digital platform. I am currently using a combination of a refreshable braille display, JAWS, and magnification to express information to you. So not only are we communicating with friends and family and coworkers, but this is something you need to locate a restaurant with good reviews, and avoid the ones that only have 2 stars. Uh, find that nearby post office. You know, there's sign up for uh, a bank account. That's rather important, but you have to be able to do that online. Sign up for a gym membership. Daily life activities is now so intertwined with digital everything. But you also have to be able to evaluate the accuracy of information that you might get in an email or on a web page, and have those skills of just stepping back and going, does that sound right? Let me go see if I can find another source to double check this. It's very important in this day and age. So the impact of refreshable braille displays on braille and digital literacy skills. So one thing you're going to gain, usually, hopefully, is improved knowledge of braille letters and contractions, increased fluency, more access to information, and hopefully you're going to gain some greater confidence and adaptability. And this comes just from the intrinsic value of having that braille at your fingertips and having that connection to get more information faster. And because we're dealing with tech, you have to have advanced problem-solving skills. Why? Because tech. How many times have you signed on to anything and something not gone exactly the way you planned it? Or opening up a web portal and you need to do 500 updates. You've got to have a list of options and things to try in your back pocket. So the unique benefits of a refreshable braille display. Diane Bronner from Paths to Literacy explains that you have more opportunities to develop uh, finger isolation and braille dot discrimination. You get this auditory feedback, which reinforces your braille learning. And okay, braille displays are cool. Kids think they're cool. They are highly motivating. They're new, they're pieces of tech, and we are raising tech natives. And of course, they provide real-time access to information, and that is so undescribably important when everybody at a moment's notice can pull out their phone and get information. We need equal access to that speed of information. So if you, let's see. So Braille displays also work as a partner to hard copy paper, Braille, and graphics, and we will dive more into that in a minute. You can locate specific text using search and find. Proofreading and editing capabilities is something in schools that everybody needs, and work, and everybody needs to be able to accurately do. And of course, they support participation with peers. Uh, Having more options gives students a chance to figure out what works best for them in different situations. Having that toolbox of 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 tools to choose between. Maybe this is what I need right now. This isn't working well for me. I'm not keeping up. I need to try something different, is something that I'm always trying to teach my students. Expressive and receptive communication through email, internet browsing, document creation, etc. And of course, they're portable solutions to meet many academic and personal needs. So the impact of refreshable Braille displays on tactile graphicacy development. So intensive Braille reading preparation for advanced tactile literacy skills. You're going to gain fluency, you're going to gain speed the more you do it. And the more you have access to it, the better your chances are. You need multiple sensory channels to process multiple kinds of information. And that just applies to all of our learners. Nobody learns one way. Nobody learns only through one channel. You need multiple ways to help that stick and to help that make sense. And of course, you're going to have opportunities to learn problem solving skills that are needed for tactile graphics reading. So one thing is learning keystrokes and navigation tools like zoom and panning help make these connections between the abstract and the concrete. So a few challenges of refreshable Braille displays, because there are. It's determining layout of text. You have one line to work with for the most part, and the formatting matters. Indentation and justification, for example. Spatial and organizational formatting, like headings and paragraphs, page numbering. These are all things that can help when looking up resources in a book, and finding where the class is starting from can be challenging to only have that one line to work with. There's no immediate overview of a document, and for locating paragraphs, which again it helps with speed. It helps with just understanding the organization of what you're about to read. And that lack of full page access to text also impacts some reading fluency and on the understanding of the relationship between the graphic and the text. So when you're reading in a social studies textbook, for example, and it says in the image below, this is what's happening, to be able to simply flow into that image doesn't interrupt the learning as much as, now go get your supplement, turn to page 65, and look at the graphic. So, characteristics and limitations of current refreshable braille displays. So, they vary in size and capacity. Single line of text, of course. Uh, Typically 14 to 40 cells. I have a 40 cell one in front of me right now. Uh, they're either 6-key Perkins Braille entry or a QWERTY keyboard. And they're pretty limited in tactile graphics functioning. Also, they have exposed Braille pins. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience who have had to send a Braille display in for repair because of, um, dirt, dust. I'm not admitting to coffee in mine, but, things happen. And that is much needed maintenance that then takes away the device for several weeks. So now we get to talk about APH's Monarch. And this is a really fun picture of a student. She's actually a former intern of mine from a few years ago, and she's standing next to one textbook, one Algebra 1 textbook in Braille, which is multiple volumes stacked up next to her. That's as tall as she is. And then she's holding the Monarch. I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie to continue on.
Wonderful. So we're going to get a nice introduction to the Monarch through a news story that was featured just recently.
Today is the best time to be a blind person in the world.
Greg Stilson is a project manager at the federally funded organization American Printing House, which is about to unveil a piece of technology they call revolutionary.
The Monarch display is a tool that provides both standard Braille and tactile graphics on the same surface.
The Monarch could drastically improve the way people who are blind, especially students, can learn. For starters, it displays 10 lines of Braille at once, while most electronic readers only can handle one.
You cannot read like that.
And this is the big upgrade. The Monarch can also present graphics and charts in full, not line by line like many readers today. I mean, imagine trying to solve a graphing equation like that.
I'd have to remember all the changes that I need to make to the current equation, as well as the line above it.
Not to mention, the Monarch can also store multiple textbooks, which you don't think about, but take a look at just how big one Braille textbook is when printed out and stacked.
I think that's more than most backpacks will accommodate.
That's APH VP of Government Relations Paul Schroeder testifying before a Congress subcommittee back in March. They're trying to secure more funding because this item is going to cost thousands of dollars when it finally hits the market, and they want to make sure it gets into classrooms.
Blind students are resilient. And we have, and I say we because I was a blind student, we have had to learn many times without sufficient materials.
APH says the Monarch should be available sometime next year, but for now, at least there's hope for students like Arushi that technology is going to finally catch up just in time for college.
I've heard from many visually impaired people who have been to college that it takes sometimes like a whole entire quarter for you to get your textbooks in Braille. That's why I'm really excited for this.
Stephanie, the audio broke out from you.
We're going to switch microphones.
There
Hopefully that. I was worried about
tech problems.
I know in real life. Definitely. All right. So the Monarch does make text and graphic information conveniently accessible in one display. It does begin to open educational and career opportunities. I've especially heard some people very excited about being able to see some coding possibilities in the future on the Monarch so that they can see things like indentations that are necessary in some forms of coding. Your graphics appear alongside your text. You have enhanced interaction with your graphics. Right now, you can pan, you can zoom, you can even go into a certain part of the graphic and look closer at it. It should increase reading fluency by allowing you to move from line to line without having to continually press the return key at the end of a line. And then grammar and spelling edits are going to be made easy with some of the new routing features. So the Monarch is, like the video said, has 10 lines of 32 Braille cells each. There are sensors along the Monarch for gesture and touch manipulation. It does have a single dot height, a Braille keyboard input, and it currently has some enhanced note-taker applications and functions using the Android platform. If you're familiar with the Braille Note Touch, then you have a head start, or the Chameleon, really. Then you have a head start into learning about the Monarch. More Monarch features. Of course, 10 lines of 32 cells doesn't sound quite impressive enough. We have to tell you that it has an integrated 320 cell tactile graphics display. This is not the slide that I'm used to that tells you how fast it refreshes, but it does refresh very quickly. It gives you the ability to pan or move across a page and to zoom in. It does have a double tap feature as well as a point and click feature. The other thing that's really neat about the Monarch is it has rapid and instant access to the APH Tactile Graphics image library, as well as you can create other PDF graphics in a black and white outline format to be read on the Monarch. So again, we have a picture on the left of the full Monarch. It is about the size of a gaming laptop and weighs right around 5 pounds. And right next to that Monarch is a picture, again, of the student standing next to the Algebra 1 textbooks that are stacked higher than she is tall. And as you can think, the Monarch would fit into a backpack so much easier than I don't have a clue, and I'm not going to count all of those textbooks in that stack. One of the neat features that is coming with the Monarch is a new file type. And that new file type is called eBRF. So we're used to BRF, and now we're going to look at electronic BRF or eBRF. It includes some enhanced navigation, as well as some dynamic formatting, and you can embed your tactile graphics within. We are expecting the first specification to come around January of 2024. I know that everybody is working very hard on this. We will continue to revise eBRF through 2024. And then hopefully we'll see some made as eBRF or born as eBRF files emerge in 2025. APH is also working on a converter that will help take BRF files and turn them into eBRF. And this converter is going to make it easier to create eBRF files than it is to create EPUB files. Some of the features that are really exciting to see coming in eBRF is the ability to designate things like headings and heading structure, like you do on a website. And those types of things are going to help students be able to navigate through books and stay with their peers so much better than the other way, which is a seek and find. Leslie, can you tell us more about how you have to find a certain page in your Braille note taker?
You have to do a lot of searching, and sometimes it's multiple attempts.
It's not easy, right? And so hopefully the conversion to eBRF is going to make navigating those files easier for our students. Some of the software that is included currently on some of our beta devices are a multi-line word processor, a tactile image viewer, and I saw the first specifications of a graphing calculator at Getting in Touch with Literacy. And that is really, really a cool feature. It also has a Braille editor, Victor Reader, which gives instant access to things like Bookshare, and the Tactile Graphic Image Library is an instant access through the Tactile Graphics portion. The other feature that we talked about was the graphing calculator, and we are working with somebody you might know in helping to create that, and that is Desmos. So if your students are using Desmos already, then hopefully this will be an easy transition for them. The other really cool piece of this that I skipped over when we were talking about books is that one of the big considerations that we have in classrooms has to do with students getting their books at the same time as peers. And we all know that there can be a delay in getting those books. This will allow Braille transcribers to be able to push those books out directly to a student's device as they are transcribed, instead of having to wait for them to be fully embossed, mailed, and received at the school in which the student is attending. We had a question in the chat about, will it work using Nemeth? And it does work using Nemeth, and there will be a math editor included on it when it is ready for the public. Leslie, have I left anything out before we head into background skills and knowledge?
I'm just going to say, because it's very exciting to me, is within the EBRF is hyperlink capability. So you're reading an article and it links to something else, and you can just tap on it and instantly go to it.
All right. Now we're going to look at some skills and background knowledge that you can even begin working on today with your students.
Okay, so skills. So we've got this coming. So what do we need to know to be prepared for it, right? So new skills and concepts for students to learn. Location-specific gestures, zooming in and out, panning left, right, up and down, and keeping orientation in a graphic. So let's dive into these. First of all, cursor routing. Cursor routing refers to the ability to directly move the cursor to a specific position on a Braille display. This facilitates quicker editing and navigation. So typically on a one-line Braille display, you have cursor routing buttons right above each Braille cell that you can push, and the Braille will, the cursor will move to that Braille cell. Since we have this multi-line display, we had to come up with a different way of doing this. So let's, we use a tapping feature using the touch sensor. So let's watch that.
I just typed a sentence in the Braille editor, but I realized I want to go back and change a word. So I'm going to route my cursor to where my finger is. I'm going to go, hi, this is, needs to say a cool device. So I'm going to put my finger in between is and really. And the cursor went right in between is and really. So I can type. Now it says, hi, this is a really cool. I just typed a sentence.
So what I didn't say in that video is I put my finger where I wanted it. I isolated one finger and I double tapped the round button in between dots 1 and 4 on the Braille display. So we call that point and click, and we'll talk about that more in a second. So double tap. So double tap is a quick succession of 2 taps on the Braille display to execute specific actions or open items. So this is like an iOS device. You're going to double tap it, but you're going to be very specific with this, and you're going to isolate one finger.
And on the screen, you can see a picture of the Monarch with Leslie's finger isolated so that she can double tap and move to a different location on the menu. Leslie, would double tap have worked in order to route your cursor in the video before?
Yes. So the default right now is the point and click, but you can change it in settings to be double tap as your main touch navigation feature.
And I will tell everybody that we do not have a video of double tap because my device currently is acting up on the double tap piece. But that I have heard is going to be better when we get a new update. All right, point and click.
So we talked a little bit about point and click already, but here's a little bit more. Point and click in this context refers to the action of selecting or activating an item by touching it with one hand and selecting a key on the Braille keyboard with the other hand. So here is here's a demonstration of how this would work in a graphic.
So I'm going to zoom in specifically on the area of the map that I want. I live in Washington State. I'm going to put my finger on the northwest corner of the map, and I'm going to double click my action button. And here I am, WA, in the Northwest. Here's my Pacific Northwest home.
Leslie, do you want to tell us a little bit about what the graphic looked like before we double tapped in the Northwest area?
Sure, it was on overview mode. So we had the 50 states map zoomed out so we could see the outline of the whole US. And this is a graphic meant for 11.5 by 11 piece of paper that we smooshed onto this screen. So you could get the general shape of the US, but you couldn't really get the details of it. And then when it zoomed in, we had the full outline of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, including the Braille abbreviations within those states that filled the majority of the tactile display.
Awesome, thank you.
Let's see, what's next? Haptic zooming. We kind of already looked at this, but haptic zooming refers to the ability to enlarge or reduce tactile representations of graphics on a display, allowing for easier navigation and understanding. So that was demonstrated there, and another good example would be that you will see in just a moment, actually. So we're going to go to panning.
Yes.
So go ahead.
Screen for this one, Leslie, we have the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, the Eiffel Tower. So the Eiffel Tower shows the good deeds. So you've got the full Eiffel Tower, and then when it zoomed in, you could really see the intricate structure of the crisscrossing metal pieces of the tower itself.
Awesome.
I was jumping ahead of myself. So let's talk about panning. Now, if you use Braille display, you know panning across a line of Braille, but now we get to add another element into it. So panning refers to shifting the displayed content on the Braille device horizontally or vertically to read more or explore the tactile graphics. So with the Monarch, we have directional crosses on either side that you can maneuver around a much larger area. So let's take a look. Go ahead.
Yes. On the screen, before we take a look at the video, there are labels on the screen pointing at 2 lines of Braille across the bottom of the display that say horizontal panning bar. And then 2 lines of braille across the side, the right side of the display in the picture, called the vertical panning bar. So now we'll look at the video. And the video is looking at a tactile representation of boron.
And I'm going to zoom in right in the middle with my zoom in button. And I now have some curved lines. So that was probably that circular shape, but I don't know how far over I can scroll with my directional crosses in either direction, except I can with the scroll bars. Then at the bottom, there's 2 lines of dots. And on the right side, there's 2 lines of dots. And those indicate the distance you still have to scroll in either direction. So the closer the bottom scroll bar is to the left corner, the less space you have to scroll in that direction. The same with the one on the side. The closer you are to the top or the bottom, the less space you have. But I have a lot of space to the right of my bottom scroll bar. So I'm going to scroll to the right. And my scroll bar moved with me. So now it's almost all the way into the corner. So I know this is the edge of the graphic. This is the right edge. And I have a lot of space.
So Leslie, what does the zoom button feel like, and where is it located on the Monarch?
Yeah, we didn't discuss that. So there is a zoom in and zoom out buttons, and they are on the bottom left and right corners of the display. On the right bottom corner, it has a cross or a plus sign, and on the bottom left, there is a minus sign button for the zoom out.
Awesome. And then you use the directional cross button to pan, correct?
Correct. Just like a video game controller.
Awesome. And now we have tactile clutter.
Okay, and tactile clutter is the overwhelming presence of too many tactile elements together on a braille display, which can make it difficult to interpret the information. A good example of this is going back to that map of the US, looking at the northeast region of the US. There's a lot of very small states crowded together, and trying to fit braille labels in that can be challenging to distinguish between.
Awesome.
So in this thought of teaching new concepts, we're going to look at something that we're calling a masking frame, or a Monarch frame, or a Monarch window. Where this was an idea of one of our teammates, Jeff Schwartz's, to help get the concept across about this zooming in, and how you can have a whole graphic in and look at a piece of it through a window. So on the screen, we have this image of the Monarch life cycle, because we're sticking to the theme. And we have in quadrants, in the upper left quadrant, we've got an egg, and we're moving over to a caterpillar, and then down to chrysalis, and then over to the monarch itself. And Stephanie is going to show you how you can make a frame. And I've certainly done this trying to help a student reading a page of braille, and the lines were too close together, so we masked some of the other clutter on the page. We just take a braille piece of paper, cut a window in it, and lay it over the tactile graphic. And this will help get this concept of part to whole that we already know we have to teach our students. This orange frame on this screen here will circle the page to show you how that might look.
I went ahead, Leslie, and had it circle the page while you were
Oh, while I was talking. Okay.
probably pretty distracting. But right now it's sitting where the egg is the center of the frame at the beginning of the life cycle.
So that would demonstrate that if you zoomed in on that section of the tactile graphic, that is what is zoomed in on. And then you could pan that frame over to the right and look at the zoomed in version of the caterpillar.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So with that idea seated in your brains, I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Thanks, Leslie and Stephanie. So interesting to think about these new skills, new concepts that we need to be fostering with our students and helping them to be prepared for using this device. So for our Hive discussion board activity that we have is just this planted question. How will you expand on and build concept awareness and new skills for the Monarch? So we have given the examples. We've talked about Zoom, the panning, the tactile clutter. If you take that URL that is dropped into the chat window right now, thank you for dropping that in. Angela, if you want to hop over into the Hive discussion board, this is one of the two questions that are planted. So thinking about how you will expand, how to build this concept awareness. While you are thinking and making that consideration, we do have a little bit of activity where, remember at the very beginning when we did housekeeping, we were talking about professionalizing parenthood. They know, the parents, the caregivers know the students best. So one of our users in the Hive mentioned that this person would bring the parents into the tactile learning team just because it's critical. They're part of the educational team. They know the child best. And it's a great point, as we had one reply that went into that tactile graphics literacy, that they may know that the benefits may not be brought into the discussion. So it's great to be mindful of that. Conchita, another attendee with us today, had just mentioned about the masking frame. What a great idea. And going to try that with her students. So great way to be teaching that brand new concept. And the idea for teaching panning is using that cutout on the paper graphic and paired with the Monarch. It's such a great strategy. And let's see, I will share out one more that it is in here that had not thought so much about just that masking frame either. So that is really sparking a conversation of that demo that you shared. So we're going to let other ideas and comments populate, and we'll circle back here shortly.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. All right, so while y'all are ruminating on all of those new skills and all of the things that the Monarch is capable of doing, we want to go back to really identifying tactile graphics literacy skills through assessments, because you do need to begin to prepare your learners to be ready for something like the Monarch, which is a full page almost of a tactile graphic. So teachers of students with visual impairments a lot of times get really into the reading portion of the learning media assessment, looking at fluency skills, as well as braille reading speed and all of those things. But sometimes we forget that the learning media assessment is supposed to address all areas of learning media for a student, including how are they going to access tactile graphics? How are we going to ensure that they have the skills that are necessary to explore those tactile graphics? Are there interventions that need to be planned to explicitly teach skills necessary for that? Touch extends beyond matching textures and recognizing shapes. And we just want to re-emphasize that here, because we know that teachers do a very good job of teaching touch in the early years. But sometimes we forget that the skills of looking at tactile graphics and really viewing those and learning tactual skills actually doesn't come inherently. It doesn't come naturally for our students. And they need context and they need training and in using those skills. So functional vision assessments are essential to identifying tactual efficiency and to identifying what may be needed in order to build those skills. So just make sure you're doing a robust learning media assessment that looks at all areas of learning media for students. Then we also want to talk a little bit about the ECC skills, because as teachers of students with visual impairments, that is our primary role, addressing the expanded core curriculum and the skills that are needed for students with visual impairments. So there are two areas of the ECC that stand out to us, one of them being compensatory access. And that is, of course, one area of the ECC, and it's critical for ensuring access to academic learning. And these are the skills which allow learners to access and communicate information about the world around them and to be literate. So some skills that might be worked on in this area to prepare a student for a refreshable braille display include concept development, spatial awareness, searching and scanning written materials. That sounds a little bit like panning. Using, I know, interpretation and creation of tactile graphics. We don't want to forget that very important piece of creating those tactile graphics, because it does build those conceptual awareness skills for students when they're able to take their ideas and turn them into a graphic.
Well, yeah, we know
And
that.
then we
Sorry,
ahead,
we know that learning to read, learning to write go hand in hand. So why wouldn't learning graphics go hand in hand with creating graphics?
I know. Leslie, how many times did you get to create tactile graphics? Do you
Apart from WikiSticks?
apart from yeah, that's kind of our go-to technology right now. Hot glue guns, all of the things that we put in our treasure chest as teachers of students with visual impairments to create those. Hopefully now we'll have some type of tool to make that a little bit easier and maybe a little bit less sticky. So another area that lends itself in assessment is assistive technology, which seems like a duh, hello area. But sometimes we forget that assistive technology is not one tool in order to give access. It's a toolbox of tools. And it's not just using that one tool, but determining what are the strengths and weaknesses regarding that tool. When is the best time to use that tool? And we need to think about where are they right now, maybe as a kindergartner sitting on the floor, using inventive spelling and writing as a group and a classroom. That technology may be different than the technology that a high school senior needs in order to access chemistry. Make sure that you're including your team when you're doing these assessments, and that the team members know that there may be a different device or even a different learning modality in order to learn different things. I do know of students who are dual media learners who may use their vision to access some components of things like math, but do fluently read and braille at the same time. So ensuring that we're giving the full access through their assistive technology and identifying what tools they need. There are lots of checklists that are out there, free and paid for checklists about using that assistive technology and learning to use that. I also highly encourage teachers to consider the technology skills that are with your state. If your state has standards in digital literacy or technology, even sometimes it's embedded in the reading standards. go to those standards and find out what are other students doing at the same age, and how do we give our student the same access to learn those skills as well.
Absolutely.
Some resources that we wanted to share with you in doing these assessments, as well as a resource that some people do not realize is a resource to develop tactile skills. The first one is the Functional Vision Learning Media Assessment through APH. Of course, that's going to help you do a robust learning media assessment. And then on the screen is my favorite book of all. It is the ECC Essentials book. And I think this is very much a necessary tool for every teacher. It's going to contain some of those checklists and some of those ideas about what you should be working on when, especially in compensatory and assistive technology. But it also includes ideas for lesson plans, a lesson plan structure on working on those things. And those are very important tools as you begin working and building skills into tactile graphicacy. And then on the screen is a picture of Animal Watch VI Suite. And some people forget that even though it has a lot of pre-algebra embedded, as well as it has a wonderful theme centering around science and learning animals, it is actually built to teach tactile graphic skills. And so a part of using this program is printing out or embossing the graphics that go along with the stories in the program. And if you are around when those graphics were sold by, hold on,
San Francisco Lighthouse, I think.
Thank you, Leslie. The San Francisco Lighthouse. You can still go to their page, but you can now download those graphics through PDF for free. So you don't have to go and purchase the embossed graphics unless you don't have an embosser and you need those embossed graphics, or you need them in a certain format. You can use many different tools in order to emboss those graphics so that students can use them. And then we want to share, again, the wonderful tool that was shared in Webinar 3, the Foundations for Tactile Literacy. You will see on the screen the cover of the tool, but we also wanted to remind everybody that this goes into advanced tactile skills, which includes using keys and legends, reading maps, charts and tables, as well as familiarity with digital tools to create tactile graphics and graphics skills using refreshable braille. Right, and now we have a few important considerations. So one of the considerations that you should think about is that refreshable braille displays do not replace hard copy braille or graphics. They are another tool to put in your toolbox. But as we've already demonstrated, there may be a need for paper braille and paper graphics in order to teach the concepts and skills necessary to zoom or pan. It also may be necessary on very complicated graphics for you to go back and use paper graphics to enhance those concepts. So devices are meant to utilize and elevate, but they don't replace the skills that are learned by reading paper braille. And the maintenance of the skills on paper is crucial for long-term success. There are situations in which hard copy braille is the most efficient way to read or express information, whether it's textual or graphic. So in schools, we have one-to-one technology. A lot of schools will give an iPad or a computer to access digital textbooks. But that doesn't replace all paper in a classroom. It doesn't replace all access to items. I know I've seen in very many history classrooms that we have maps plastered on the wall, just in large form, in paper form, because that's the best way to really access that amount of information in one graphic. So just think about this as another tool in the toolbox to make access quicker, and that time from translation to the fingertips of students to read that Braille shortened. And it's bolded on the screen because it's so important to say. Students need multiple modes of gathering and sharing information, not just students, even us as adults. I don't only use email, I also use text messages, phone calls. I write notes. There's a note on my front door right now saying, do not ring my doorbell. So some of the challenges that we face with electronic tactile graphics representation sometimes, we can lose the sharpness of our lines or other graphic features. It can lack effectiveness to access tactile graphic texture levels and types. If you have something really complicated, we may be using different textures, and the tactile graphic interface may not be the best place to access that information. It may actually be better on some other type of Braille, like a thermoform or a collage graphic of some sort. If you need more presentation space, like you need to see the entire graphic or read the entire graphic, electronic graphics should partner with hard copy graphics in learning and in use. And now I am going to turn it over to Amy.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. This is a wealth of information. I'm super excited to jump in and get a chance to introduce APH's Director of Global Innovation and Strategy, Greg Stilson, to everyone here. It's not every day we get the chance to talk directly with the person who is helping to bring a Braille and tactile graphics device into our very near reality. Greg, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is fantastic information you guys are sending out to everybody. I love it.
Now, I know we could talk about Monarch for hours. Perhaps it's a love language of yours now, but unfortunately, we only have a matter of minutes. So I'll go ahead and just kind of jump in. And we had some questions for you that we're just eager to hear from you on.
Great.
So how do you think the Monarch and other upcoming innovations like eBRF will shape the future for our students who read Braille?
That's a good question. So, you know, when we look at what's happening today, right, with BRFs and things like that, BRFs are very static. They're made for a standard piece of paper. eBraille and all the things that we're doing here with multi-line Braille, I'm incredibly excited to see how kids learn to read, right? I'm a user of a single line display. I love single line displays, but we can develop some pretty bad habits when learning to read exclusively on a single line display. Things like utilizing the butterfly method of reading, right? Reading with two hands, tracking, that type of things. But most importantly, I'm super fired up to see what these kids are able to do with formatting and understanding spatial, orientation, things like that, things like indenting and tables and all that kind of stuff is incredible. I see a lot of resumes that are written by some blind people, and quite honestly, there's a lot of blind people that don't learn formatting. They don't understand the concept of centering and seeing that type of spatial information. The other piece is, being able to digitally deliver content to a platform like the Monarch, where you can have books or curriculum sent directly to the device. It's going to reduce time to fingertips exponentially. And so you're going to see these situations where kids may not have been getting their books, for months and months and months. Hopefully we'll start to see that dwindling down, right? It's still going to take time to produce the books because we have transcribers involved, and that's going to take some time to go through that process. But we're removing the time that it takes to produce, to emboss these, to bind, to package, to ship, all that kind of stuff, just with doing an upload button to the cloud and having it appear on your device.
So since this device gives more access to the Braille content, what do you believe is the best approach for guiding students who are learning to read Braille text alongside the tactile graphics?
You guys have covered a lot of this already, and it's super crucial that we look at starting with the paper copies, right? Paper books, paper braille. There's so many concepts that we refer to in the Monarch, specifically in the book reader and things like that, where we refer to things like going to chapter, going to page, turning pages, understanding those physical turning of a page, right? Understanding those concepts is crucial to be able to make those connections when you go into a digital world, right? So being able to jump to page 65 and be able to relate that to actually turning a book's page to 65, right? So starting there is crucial. But the other thing that I think is important as well is when you start with tactile graphics, understanding what is a point symbol, what is shading, what is texture. Seeing that on a piece of paper is really crucial to sort of building those concepts in your brain before you move to a digital platform. And then once we get there, now you're able to sort of connect the dots, no pun intended, when you actually get in to a digital world like that. The one thing I will say is the Monarchs, in order to do what we're doing with this device, these are equidistant pins. Braille spacing is not equidistant. So we do some magic under the hood to allow us to do standard Braille characters along with being able to show tactile graphics. And the equal distance spacing is what allows us to do things like curvatures and things like that. So just to say that it's important to understand, sort of, to be able to read the Braille before we actually move into looking at tactile graphics, because the spacing is very, very minusculely different than what you'll see on paper. We haven't seen any challenges in testing. People notice it for a second and then their brains sort of wrap around it. But it's important that the kids read the Braille first before you kind of tack it onto a graphic and start to see things like lead lines and stuff like that.
Okay. So, in so many ways, I feel like I've been drinking from a fire hydrant today, taking in like the new concepts that we've been talking about. What advice would you give to teachers who are preparing right now to teach their students to use the Monarch?
I would say, and I've done so many workshops with teachers in my career and things like that, and it's always so funny because when I'm doing a workshop, I get these teachers that want to write down literally every word that I'm saying. And the reality is, with the Monarch, you don't have to be an expert at everything. Teach your students the problem-solving skills so that they can help themselves. The Monarch, we built it on a platform where there is context-sensitive help, context menus everywhere. In these context menus, we have the keyboard shortcuts at your fingertips so that you know exactly what you need to do in these situations. So you don't have to have the manual sitting next to you. But most importantly, making sure that your student knows where to find these help tools so that they can start to help themselves, I think, is really crucial. The last thing I'll say is that the Monarch can do a lot, right? We built it so that the kid can use it in virtually every class that they're in. Having said that, the reality is, your student may not need everything that the Monarch offers right now. So making sure that you don't feel overwhelmed, the student doesn't feel overwhelmed with all the things that they can do, is essential as well. So really just focusing on where your student's at and then building upon those skills. But just to kind of recap on that whole problem solving piece, the students all the tools are there so that they can problem solve.
I'm latching on one of the words that you said in the beginning of answering that, and that was being an expert. And so that is really helpful advice. And I know I definitely appreciate it because you are giving me permission to not feel like our students need to know everything from the get-go. So second to last question for you with this. What features does Monarch have that you would say you're most excited about? I'm sure there's a lot of different things, but what is most that you would say?
I'm really excited to see how students. I mean, we've already started to see it during our testing. I brought the Monarch to the Braille Challenge finals and did some demonstrations and work with some of these students. And students have never had access to a capability of just looking for graphics and then having them appear at their fingertips. And that's just something that has been so moving to me, especially as a blind person myself, is that with our connection to the Tactile Graphics Image Library, if you have a Wi-Fi connection, you can just literally search the thousands and thousands of graphics that we have in the TGIL. The kid could look for a picture of a dog. They could look for the picture of the US map, or, the really exciting boron atom that you guys got to see earlier on, right? But the kid can do that just with one search criteria and see all the results instantaneously and have it at their fingertips right then and there. And that's just something that we've never been able to do. If you wanted to see graphics before, you had to have an embosser. You had to have somebody who knew how to use the embosser. And there's always a delay between finding the graphic you wanted to see and actually having it under your fingertips. And I think we're starting to see a situation where that's going to be reduced. This whole reduction of time to fingertips is really the metrics that we've been looking at. The last thing I would say is the math. Stephanie mentioned she saw a sneak peek of this. That was actually the first time I had seen a sneak peek of it, and it's pretty incredible to be able to, using Nemeth or UEB math, whatever your preferred code is, to type an equation and then do a command and actually see hey, I did actually plot a parabola, for example, and that's an upward facing parabola, or that's a downward facing parabola. I heard somebody mention Wikisticks. That's how I did it 20 years ago in school, and we're still doing the same thing, right? So I'm really excited to see how people use the graphing calculator and be able to actually do their STEM homework on this device and bring in the tactile graphs.
There has been so much packed into even getting us ready to present the information that you shared today, that just feeds into the field testing that has occurred. So the last question we just want to ask, in reflecting on the things that you've learned, what challenges did you face in developing, and then the field testing of this, how did you overcome those challenges?
There were several. I would say the biggest challenge that we saw initially when we started looking at the technology is, these cells are very different than the cells that are in your existing Mantis, Chameleons, Braille notes, all that kind of stuff. Those are called piezoelectric cells. This is an entirely different Braille technology, where when piezoelectric cells, the part that you see is only one portion of the actual cell technology. It goes into your machine a good, half inch or so, but it would be impossible for us to actually stack those in an equidistant array, whereas this technology allows us to actually stack cell on cell, right? The cool thing is that we've been able to overcome a lot of the challenges. One of the things Leslie mentioned was cursor routing, right? On a single line display, you have cursor routers above the display technology. Here we had to build in touch sensitivity so that you can physically tap or point and click on a cell to route the cursor there. And that is a learning curve. We saw that during field testing. We saw different strategies to get the student oriented to that. But the other piece of that is being able to identify where your cursor is on a multi-line display. And so, on a single line display, you have generally a 1 in 40 chance of knowing where your cursor is. But here we have 320 characters on this display. So finding a cursor could be a challenge. So we experimented a lot with different shaped cursors and different styles. And getting the feedback from our user testing has been incredible. And so we've been able to make some changes under the hood to make things like cursor tracking, spacing, and especially that point and click much more dialed in.
This is also amazing for me to take in, because I distinctly remember being trained on using the Braille and Speak, like 100 years ago. And so now we're here sharing these huge advances that you've been articulating that give that accessibility and independence with learning. Greg, I lied. I said that you were all done, but I would be remiss to say that we know this takes a village in order to work through things. Just in some closing remarks, and I'll shift things over to Leslie. She has some excellent student perspectives to share. What would you be able to share just about the partnership that has helped us? Because it takes a village.
It does. This is we've sort of said this is the field's device. It would be impossible for APH to do this in a vacuum. We've partnered with the National Federation of the Blind. We've partnered with Dot Incorporated on the technology. This device wouldn't be possible without their innovative cell technology in this device. And then the eBraille, quite honestly, this device is only one piece of the puzzle. The eBraille project, we're partnering with the DAISY Consortium and over 40 organizations around the world to develop a new Braille standard. And that Braille standard we're hoping is going to last as long as the BRF has lasted, right? So, and then of course, all of our field testing, you folks and outreach, getting the word out and teaching all these incredible skills, because quite honestly, if we don't have the transition skills from low tech to high tech like this, students are not going to be able to use this device very well. So it's been an incredible process to go through. We just completed field testing, as you mentioned, Amy, of almost 50 devices in every region of the United States. So it's pretty exciting to be at this point.
Well, I know that there's still a few other closing remarks, and Leslie, you have in store for us to introduce a young lady for Student Perspectives.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to quickly circle back around from that news story. You met Arushi, and I have a few quotes from her. She was, I keep getting awesome interns. She was my intern this last summer, and she's a high school senior. And I got to plunk the early Monarch in front of her and say, tell me what you think, pick it apart. And one thing, her overall impression was, I saw endless possibilities for its uses, both as a user and as a student going into college. I see many uses, whether coding or taking AP tests with maps, or using it in mathematics to graph with Desmos, or even improving fluency with reading. I did not coach her. And I will just skip down to how do you envision using the Monarch in math class, because that has been something we've touched on. She said, in math classes I've struggled, whether it's been algebra or geometry or trigonometry. They've all had some examples of having tactile graphics or figure shapes. But with this refreshable Braille display, you can graph in real time like other students. You can see how your equations are changing the graph. So, preparing our learners. The Monarch is coming. Are your students ready? Okay, I'll stop doing that. Now is the time for preparation and instruction. To build their skills, we need to prepare our students to independently read, understand, and interpret tactile graphics. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Amy to close us out.
I wasn't as quick on the trigger with my finger with getting myself unmuted. No one wants to hear a dog barking in the background, although I do have a very cute dog. So back in the Hive discussion board activity. So here's another question that we have posed just to give your mind primed and thinking. What is your plan for assessing your learners' current knowledge and skill level? How will you begin instruction on the tactile graphic skills and concepts needed for advancing to the Monarch? So I'm just going to take this as an opportunity to share out that we have uploaded into our handouts that is on the Access Academy webpage a really useful tool that we showcased in webinar 3, Tactile Skills Foundation. And there are a lot of uses for this, of whether you are needing to pinpoint where your student is at on the progression of gaining tactile skills, thinking about progress monitoring. If you have not had the opportunity to tap into that, document, please go over and open it up, utilize it. It is so incredibly helpful. And what teacher doesn't want another resource in the toolbox? But over in the discussion boards, there are some other activity that's been in here. I can kind of just look over a few things. So one person wrote in software, I wonder how it interacts with the Braille Blaster. I wanted to mention this because this is kind of the power of using a discussion board. These questions will always remain. You can go back, you can learn, you can find out, does somebody have the same question that you have and have already asked it? Someone wrote in and said that they've used Firebird software to build graphics, but I'm not sure if those files can be updated into the Monarch. Maybe you know an answer to that. Maybe you know about the Braille Blaster or using this other software. You can go in and reply directly to that. Someone else had written in and said, I can see how completing tactile puzzles as a prerequisite skill would lend itself towards this concept. Understanding how smaller, isolated chunks can be combined to make a fuller representation is helpful. Someone says, hey, how did you teach scrolling with hard copies? I have a student currently who is struggling with this concept and I would love ideas. This is the power again of the village, of coming together, because we all don't have the answers, but someone has dabbled in these ideas and these concepts, and they are being archived here into the discussion board. So that will remain open. We invite you to come in, browse through. You never know what you're going to learn. And even if you think you have nothing to contribute, you never know if someone has asked a question that you know the answer to and that you are that great source of encouragement to the person. So in our closing together, we are wrapped up in this webinar series of 4, where it was our mission here at APH to set the stage of helping you to envision what is coming for digital literacy, what needs to happen for our students so that we are always building and enriching their skills, getting to them to the point of being ready. That was the reason of the progression of all of these webinars that have made it to the apex of showing and unveiling and sharing a sneak peek about the Monarch with you. So we have those handouts that are available if you want to go snag them. Leslie, Stephanie, Greg, amazing content that you have given to us to think about. We know where the future is headed with this digital literacy. You have given us ideas of things that we know we need to consider in our instruction. We thank the APH for this great resource, Tactile Foundation. I just left my brain. Tactile Skills Foundation. I'm so sorry. It's so important. Greg, you jumped in. You joined us today. Thank you so much. And just to each and every one of you who have been with us, each and every one, we say thank you.